Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Living Astrology with Janet Hickox. Grab your cup of coffee or your tea, sit back, and let's chat about what's going on in the stars above. Today is Moon in Libra. Today is the day that we have been looking at for a bit this week about when the moon would come into a square relationship with both Pluto and Saturn in Capricorn, adding a bit of difficulty to our energies for today. And it's not that it's that difficult, really. I mean, it can be. It's that there is a power surge that sort of is running through the field of energy. And I felt this start up yesterday, actually, must have been the late afternoon. Maybe it was closer to like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, my time. And it started with like a vibration in my right ear. And then from there, it went into a pain in that ear. And trust me, I'm not sick and I don't have anything, going on in my body that I can tell, other than I was picking up some information. I do believe it was information. And then last night, I had a fascinating dream. And I'm going to share that with you guys in a little bit because it goes hand in hand with something else going on in the stars above today. But I think I had totally forgotten that the planet Mars is moving through the sign of Sagittarius in the later degrees. In fact, today he's at 28 degrees, which means that yesterday he was at 27 degrees, which who else is there? The galactic center. So we had Mars, a planet of action and new direction, passing across the face of where the galactic center streams information here into not only our planet, but into the whole of the solar system. And it allows us at that time to pick in or pull in the stream of information that is coming in from that particular place. The galactic center, as we've discussed before, is a center of cosmic energy and gamma rays and all kinds of particles, neutrinos stream into our planet. And when the sun is uber quiet, like our sun right now is very quiet and has been, it's in the low part of his wave, the low part of his cycle. Without that sunspot activity, which throws off magnetism that ends up, dispersing some of those particles, a lot more of that cosmic energy bathes the earth. And so it puts us in a position of being able to really connect with that neutrino energy, which is what creates mutation on the planet. Fascinating, right? So here we are with a planet like Mars, who's aggressive, sometimes assertive, always, is dynamic and requires action. He's that masculine principle. And the masculine principle is outward energy. So it's pushing outward, where the feminine energy is more inward. She pushes inward, he pushes outward. So the energy of Mars crossing then the galactic center is opening us up to some form of new truth or some form of new information. Now, at the moment, my ear was going nutsy cuckoo. I couldn't figure out what it was. I even closed my eyes and just tried to tap in to see, what is this? What information is coming in? And I wasn't able to get it then, but I got it later, much later in the dream state, just before I woke up this morning. And I thought it was pretty interesting the way that showed up. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a little bit. Today, we have the moon still in Libra with a void of course moon occurring at 1:41 p.m. my time. So 4:41 p.m. for you all on the East Coast, 9 o'clock tonight for those of you in the Universal Time Zone. And that really is a very short one, only about 3 hours by 4:38 p.m. It is over here, 7:38 p.m. It is over for you all on the East Coast. And that it breaks the void with the movement of the moon out of Libra and into Scorpio. So we'll have a change up in the energy for the day tomorrow. And we have this blip on the screen today where we may just feel like we've lost energy, or where things we can't push anymore, where we want to rest, or where we want to let go of the things that we've been doing and just maybe, get into a good book. Get your Gene Keys book out and study for tomorrow. that will be later in the day for us here on the West Coast. For you all on the East Coast, pretty much that happens after you're home in the evening, I would presume, and sets you up for a nice evening of meditation or just chilling and not, using your brain to try to figure out anything. Now, because the moon is in the later degrees of Libra, we are going to come into contact with our planets in Capricorn. The sign Libra and the sign Capricorn are squaring one another. Square is just a term that kind of labels the relationship between the moon in Libra and Jupiter, Saturn. Well, this will be Saturn and Pluto and Saturn, and the south node. Actually, no, it won't be the south node. That's already occurred. It'll be Pluto and Saturn and Chariklo, and that will happen later in the day, before the moon goes void, though. So somewhere around noonish this afternoon. And remember, every time we have that square, it sort of takes us to that next level of what are we reconstructing in our lives? What are we rebuilding? What are we reevaluating? And Libra, as a relationship sign, may be having you reevaluate what your relationships are in your work, or the groups that you belong to, or the people that you have around you in your life. So today's a day where we may feel sort of serious at times, and at other times it lightens up. This is a day where we will really sort of waffle between a lot of different energies, and it could be different for everybody depending on where that stellium of planets in Capricorn is sitting for you personally. And so just be expecting, right? We're seeking balance when the moon is in Libra, but balance may be consistently getting out of whack today, as we may be a little bit on the seesaw. We're riding the waves, right? Riding the waves. The energy seems to be pulling us in different directions. You may be, for example, especially because here we are in the shadow of Valentine's Day, you may be feeling pulled to do something in your relationships. And then on the other hand, you have demands at work, or demands, in the community that you're a part of. So we may have this clash going on between the relationships that we're in and the goals and ambitions, or the responsibilities that we have in the outer world. So we are weighing all the possibilities and seeing things from all the facets, all the different sides. And at times then that kind of upsets our balance a bit, makes us feel like we're going in too many directions. It can trigger more indecision. That's one of Libra's more negative frequencies, is indecision. So remember that this is a blip on the screen for the day. Later, after 4:38 p.m. Pacific time, 7:38 p.m. East Coast time, that's going to shift when the moon moves into Scorpio, and then it will move into a dynamic almost immediately with an opposition to Uranus. So out of that lull, or that crazy, chaotic a bit energy maybe of the earlier part of the day, in the later part of the day, the opportunity for some kind of awakening or revelation or change happens. Right. So that's the high side, is that later on in the day, it may all make perfect sense. Everything may line up exactly as you thought it should, where earlier in the day, it was touch and go, right? Up and down and all around. So hold tight. Things will change as we shift later into the day. All right, I'm going to go over to Facebook here just to say good morning to everybody. Now I've got to find where everybody is, because, oh, look at that picture. I'm in the wrong place. Living Astrology, there's where it is. And video stream. Oh no, I want to go home. There we go. So good morning to everybody out there. And let's see, comments. Debbie Hedden, good morning. Snow day. So we have the grandkids. No playing outside. It's 2 degrees. I can't even imagine. The coldest it's ever been here that I remember since I've lived in Washington, it was 7 degrees. And that was on Halloween night. And the kids in their costumes had to bundle up triple because, 7 degrees, you're out in that kind of temperature for any length of time, and it's can be frostbite city. Colleen, good morning. Mimi, good morning. Jacqueline, good morning. It's great to see everybody out there. And if you're in those frosty areas this morning, bundle up, get yourself a good cup of coffee or tea, and just relax and enjoy the day, right? It might be a great day for being indoors, doing indoor pursuits. Keeping the kids busy, that might be another challenge there, Debbie. If you have responsibilities or things that you had planned on getting done today, they could be disrupted by child energy, which is awesome energy. Okay, now remember too, I wanted to start working with the moon in the different gates. So every day the moon transits through 2 to 3 different gates. And today we have the moon already transited through one of the gates. And let's see, today is the 13th. And it started out the morning very, very early, so middle of the night while you were sleeping, in the gate 57, which is a gate of psychic energy. That makes sense if we were having, dreams or weird things happen to us. It could have been as a result of the moon moving through a gate in your human design on the spleen that can trigger both a fear of the future, but also insight and intuition into what the next steps are. It's one of those, all the energies, by the way, in your human design have both the high frequency and the lower frequency. And then the gift frequency, which we might call neutral, or we might call just the good part of that energy. Ugh, don't like to use the words good or bad, but it is that frequency band, if you will, of ways that these energies can show up in our lives. So the gate 57, albeit in the shadow, it is the fear of the future and can trigger within us that survival energy. On the high side, it is the ability to be intuitive, to really know and understand, to sort of see through the morphology of the universe and into the what we call the morphogenetic field, where you can pull out the energy, the information of which direction happens next. Where do we go next? Where do I go next? And somewhere in between, we might have instinct, and we just know with some kind of feeling deep within us that this is the direction to go, but we can't quite put our finger on why we know that. So it is a really good energy that we were in earlier, albeit it had a fear possibility with it as well. And that could have been showing up, since mostly that happened for us in the night or late yesterday evening. We might have experienced that in our dreams. Now, right this moment, the moon has moved into the gate 32. I'm going to share my screen because I did put this somewhere. Let me see if I can share it. There we go. And I apologize because this is in paint, and my cursor is nice up here, but when it gets down here to the body, it turns into this target. And I know a couple of people told me that they couldn't see the cursor, but up here you can see my cursor's pink. Just watch it now turn gray. It looks like the crosshairs of something. And I'm going to call your attention down here to the spleen center. And here, this gate 32 is where the moon is sitting at right now. And the moon in 32 is meeting up with Jupiter at gate 54. And gate 54 is a gate of ambition and drive. And I apologize, it cut it off for some reason here, and I can't even make it bigger. And I was going to redo it, but I didn't realize that until 5 minutes before I had to go live. So it's okay. You guys can imagine this line from the spleen draws down to the root center and joins up at gate 54. So we have this entire channel here of transformation that is triggered here this morning, at least, with the moon at gate 32. Now, the gate 32 is a gate that is about success and failure. In fact, the gate 32's name in human design is endurance. It is the energy where we're here for the long haul, where our goals and ambitions that arise in the gate 54 on the root center find expression and are able to endure until we reach success. And actually, in the integral human design, the spleen center, while it still has the survival characteristics, is the center for success. Right? If you want to think about it, it's the success of a species that makes it through from their beginnings to their more evolved state, such as humanity, right? When we were in the caves and we were very primitive, we survived all kinds of cataclysms, and the evolutionary energy here in the spleen allowed us to survive, right? So survival energy is appropriate. It has kept us alive. And at 32, then we're looking at whether we are successful or have we failed. And I want to just say that a lot of times the fear here is of failure. But I also think that for a good percentage of us out there, it might be more like what Marianne Williamson thinks, that we're afraid of success. We're afraid of our greatness. We're afraid to be truly bright and light in our expression, like somehow we're taking energy away from others, or who knows what our real fear is there. But today, all of that is up in your face, right? Are you afraid of failing? Are you afraid of succeeding? And I'll tell you another little quinky dink that happens when this particular channel is all defined. It can push us into workaholicism. And workaholism, where we continually work and work and work, persevering and enduring through all kinds of bumps and bruises, which is good unless you are open in this center and now you're borrowing this energy. And that endurance might be pushing you, pressuring you to stay the course on something that isn't correct for you. So you may feel like a failure. For example, I have a couple of people who are getting ready to move through divorces in their lives. And what's the first feeling that comes up when something like that happens is that we failed, that I'm a failure, that I wasn't good enough, or that I was inadequate. Yesterday, remember, we dealt with inadequacy. Today, we're dealing with failure or success. Now, later in the day, this afternoon, let's see if I can tell you the time. I'm always bad at translating these times. 18:35. That's 6 o'clock, 6:35 universal time. Yeah. So 6, 7, so later this morning or closer to noon, perhaps, this energy will shift to the gate 50. And the gate 50 is the gate of corruption in the shadow, equilibrium in the gift, and harmony in its highest expression. In human design, we call this the gate of values. It is a gate also on the spleen. It is in the tribal circuitry, and it happens to be the feminine tribal circuitry. So remember when I was telling you earlier today, or earlier this morning, that the moon would be in an opposition to Uranus later this afternoon? Well, here it is, right? This will be the moon at gate 50, opposing the planet Uranus at the gate 27, filling in this entire channel, which is the channel of nurturing and values, being response able. The fear on this gate is that we might fail in our responsibilities to our family, to our tribe, to our community. So we tend to, again, overwork, overdo, over nurture, smother, and hold tight to those around us, as we are afraid that if we let go, then they won't survive and then it will be our fault. That's sort of the unconscious thing going on here. In its highest expression, this channel is all about how we nurture and grow our tribe or our community. So it is very much the feminine energy of laying down the law, the rules and the regulations, being responsible, teaching, feeding, clothing. The education factor here is huge. Often when you have this channel defined in your own chart, you find yourself as a teacher, usually with children. And for right now, we might all be faced with, like Debbie Hedden, a day of the snow, a snow day where your grandchildren are with you, and you might be placed in the position of teacher today. So here is more spleen energy then being triggered for all of us throughout the day. So taking a look, I think this will be the last of this. Well, we have 2 more gates to go through. Those will be likely tomorrow when we go through the gate 28 struggle and the gate 44, the recognition of patterns, a fear that the past will repeat itself, but that's all tomorrow. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else I wanted? Oh, I wanted to talk about what gate 50 is when we talk about corruption. I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute so that I can look at you. Corruption. When we look at it in human design, corruption is more of a gene keys expression. I'm not sure I've ever heard it expressed the same way in human design, but this is an energy where there is a code in your DNA that's being read, right? It begins with a start codon, and it ends with a terminator codon. And in between those two codons is information. And that information is coding for something. It might be for replacing cells in your liver. It might be for a personality trait. It might be for any number of things, right? Any human expression, any human physical expression. So we have code. And when we are looking at it from a biological standpoint, we have messenger RNA or RNA, ribonucleic acid, which takes that information and puts it into transcription phase, right? It starts transcribing the information. And sometimes that information gets corrupted, just like when you are uploading or downloading an update to one of your apps, or like yesterday, I went through a Windows update, and that can sometimes corrupt your system, right? Where you have to then uninstall and then reinstall. Well, that happens all the time in your body. And our bodies are very adept at reading when that's happened. And another chemical comes along and takes out that bad part, that wrong piece of transcription, and inserts the correct information, right? This is why we need health in our body, so that our body can recognize when that's happened and fix it. So corruption here in the gate 50 isn't necessarily about the physical expression. It's more about how we misinterpret information that's coming in, and then it becomes corrupted. So we may take in an information about what the laws and the rules and how those work, and it gets corrupted, and it doesn't get corrected, and it begins to become damaged. And you can look at the bigger things in the outer world. For example, are the laws as they pertain to people who have money versus the laws to people who don't, right? You have a great attorney, you can afford the best, you get off. And if not, you go to jail for the rest of your life, kind of disparity. And that is what we would call corruption. There's been a misread in that code. And at some point we have to fix that code, right? It'll either self-correct, or we have to actually do something to correct this code. And trust me when I say you really would rather self-correct than to have it destroyed and then have to be rebuilt, right? So that is, you want to, if you have to uninstall something and reinstall it, that's a bigger process than just being able to go in and fix that file and go on. So this gate 50 is really important as it relates to us in community, in tribes, in nations, and as people on a planet, because it brings up the values that we live by, that we swear by, right? It brings up to us the things that we find important, that we really value. And if we're not living by those values, then the base of our society or of our community or tribe begins to disappear, right? Begins to fall apart, disintegrating right before our very eyes. And that's what you're seeing in the outer world, is the effect of corruption, a misreading of the values here in this case, or the laws, or the misapplication of the rules and the regulations, and not equally. Notice that it is equilibrium in the gift, and it is harmony in the highest. So until we reestablish a baseline where we're truly living by our values, we'll continue to see that corruption in the outer world. And as we've been talking about all week with the sun at the gate 49, the responsibility for beginning the change, for healing the corruption, if you will, begins within you. Right? I can't go out there and make all those people start behaving correctly when it comes to laws, but I can make sure that I'm clean here, and then that will drive what I do in the outer world in support of living from those values. God, I hope all of this is making sense, because it's huge in the grand scheme of things. And of course, it's also under cosmic or evolutionary pressure to change at this point in time. All right, slipping back over to the Facebook, dangling, gate 32, canceling, dangling. Ah, there we go. I get it now. dangling with red and black, but of course, open spleen. Right. So gate 32, hanging is the word you're looking for, Debbie. And in human design, when a gate is only filled halfway, that is called a hanging gate. And it becomes a place where you are electromagnetically drawn to someone that might have the opposite end. And when it happens, boom, magic, right? The channel is complete and you can do more temporarily than you could without that energy being completed. And it just so happens that today that energy is completed because the moon is what's at gate 32 and there is Jupiter at gate 54. So we have a connection that's being made for you in your human design. So Debbie, because you're a reflector, then what you're looking at right now is a defined spleen and a defined root center. So that's new for you, right? That's a new energy that's happening for you today, meaning you may feel more pressured today, or maybe you feel less pressured to get things done today because you feel like, oh yeah, this is working. So it would be interesting to see what your experience is of the day because of your being a reflector. Jacqueline says, I have the spleen and sacral defined and the line is filled in all black. So it's connected. How will that matter in my life at this moment? It really doesn't change anything for you at all, Jacqueline, because you're already broadcasting this energy on a day-to-day basis. It may just bring it up for you. There may be a little more emphasis put on it for the day, but it doesn't change anything. Unlike Debbie, who is as a reflector, anytime anything pops up in her chart, it completes something and then can create a conditioned response, or it can create the possibility for a new expression of where she might see herself more clearly. Debbie says, of course I knew that. Of course you know that because your whole life is about the reflection and you're a person who needs people around you and the energy of the transiting planets to help you see yourself more clearly. And by the way, as a reflector, that also helps people around you see themselves more clearly because they're seeing in you a reflection of what's going on for them, should they choose to understand that better and, become more responsible for their own selves in life. So, okay, good energy there. No other questions at the moment. I don't see anything. So I also want to remind everybody that the planet Saturn, who is quickly moving now to meet up with 0 degrees Aquarius here shortly, I think the end of March, so literally a little more than a month away, Saturn will make his first move into the sign of Saturn. And I was, this always happens. This morning, was I drying my hair? I can't remember if I was drying my hair. No, I was putting on my mascara and doing a really bad job of it at first. And I realized, oh my gosh, people who have Saturn in Aquarius, and you might be anywhere from maybe 47, maybe your low 50s to mid 50s, you are going to be staring down the barrel of a Saturn return. And I recall, and it depends on, of course, what degree of Aquarius your Saturn sits at. But for those of you who maybe were born, let's see, 1963, 64, 65-ish, you're the ones that are primarily that I'm speaking to here, as what is occurring for you is as Saturn makes that move forward and gets closer and closer to Aquarius, it begins the process of your second Saturn return. Even if you were like me, with I'm at the end of the transit of Saturn through Capricorn, it still is triggering something in you because it's almost like, oh, the handwriting's on the wall. And I recall when I first had that happen, it was nearly 2.5 years ago, right? That was right when Capricorn became the home for Saturn. I began this process, even though I didn't know it at the time, but I began struggling personally with my own identity and who was it that I wanted to be in the world and how was I going to show up in the world? And there's almost and maybe this is unique to women, because I haven't really talked to many men about this, but for me, it was, okay, I realized I had gotten colorless in my life, that somehow when I looked at my wardrobe, it was blacks and grays or blue, dark blues. It wasn't brightly colored. And I didn't realize that color was the key here yet for me. But I began a process, and I'm going to share this link on the page later after the broadcast this morning, of rebuilding myself, or reimagining myself. There we go. That's the best word. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really setting the stage for my ultimate Saturn return, which I am experiencing in the moment. March 5th, it's exact. And then I'll play with it a little bit throughout the next several months. And it bears watching then. If you have Saturn in Aquarius, then you're coming up to a point where either you're going to have your first Saturn return if you're between about 28 and 30, or you're going to have your second Saturn return if you're somewhere around 55 to 60. And it's a time for you to reevaluate yourself, reimagine yourself. And one of the sites that really helped me do that is a very feminine site. So sorry, guys, this probably wouldn't be for you, but it was a site about determining what your color scheme was, what color makeup, what color clothing. And for God love me right now, I cannot remember the name of the site, but I will find it, because it was huge in helping me reestablish myself, to get back on track with who I was. So I just wanted to bring that up for some of you, because Saturn now sitting at the gate 60 today, moving forward into the gate 60, brings us back to the possibility where we feel limitation, where we feel caught up, where we can't see the forest for the trees, right? That we've been, so blinded by our lives, or we've been so caught up that we've gotten limited, and we need to make a jump out of that, right? We need to move from that limitation into realism. And it's interesting because realism, to me, at first I'm reading, this was in the Gene Keys, by the way, when I first started reading about this. Realism in the Gene Keys isn't about, oh, you got to be real and you got to be logical and you got to be down to earth. And if I can see it, feel it, taste it, touch it, then it exists. Nope. It's about magical realism. It's about seeing the magical and the mystical and the more pragmatic, practical. It is that we are of both, right? So that realism isn't just the concrete sequential, it's the abstract, and it's the beautiful, and it's the magical, and the mystical, the spiritual, and the physical. So I bring this up to you because this is, the first kind of hurrah that Saturn is bringing to people who are going into their Saturn return time, either their first one or their second one. And if you happen to be alive and going into your third one and you're listening, which would put you in your 80s maybe, then this is a time for you to just sit back and relax and enjoy life. Do whatever you want, right? There aren't any real responsibilities on you at this time, except to stay as well as you can and support your family and love everybody. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up because that is in the offing for some of you. And I know as I've done readings with some of you this year, looking ahead at the astrology of 2020, I've mentioned that to several of you that I've talked to that have that coming up. So I will post that link just because it gave me a new view to myself, who I am, and what I really love. And that's what you need at this particular point in time. Okay, questions. I'm going to go back to Facebook because I know that lags behind where I am. Brenda, good morning to you. It's good to see you. And Jacqueline says, so I have a few years to get ready for my return. Okay, that's good, right? That's good. Saturn, Saturn is a taskmaster. And by the way, Saturn's cycle breaks down into it's like 28.5 years. I always just round it up to 30. But it breaks down into 7-year cycles. 7 times 4, right, is 28. So you've got every time that Saturn moves through 7 years of time, it's moving into a different configuration with its natal position. So when you're 7 years old, you have a Saturn square. When you are 14, you have a Saturn opposition. When you're 21, you have another Saturn square, the closing square. And then when you're 30-ish, 28-ish, you have your first Saturn return. And then it goes through that same 7-year. And each one of those cycles are often repeats of the things that were occurring at that time in your life. And it's so similar to the gene keys when we look at the SQ, IQ, EQ, and the prenatal, the gestation period, that it's almost, the coherence is very striking. And I know some of you are new here and you may not remember me talking or have not heard me talk about the IQ, SQ, EQ, but these are the times of your life where, for example, the SQ is is your first 7 years of life where you're going through the physical development. And then from 7 to 14, you're moving through your emotional development. And then from 14 to 21, you're moving through your mental development. And then we come back again to the time period where it starts over. So each one of those are sort of repeats of one another, not necessarily. So for example, give you a great example. If something very emotional happens in the family from, age 7 to 14, let's say your parents get a divorce, then your emotional intelligence is imbued with whatever the emotional field was during that time. So you may find yourself then later on in life repeating that somehow, that emotion in or that emotional lack of intelligence, perhaps, begging you to become emotionally response able and not reactive later on in your life. So I just had a thought about that too. That's interesting because I remember somewhere between 7 and 14, I ran away from home. I packed my bag. My mother said something flip, like, if you don't like it, leave. So I did. But I also did that when I was around 40. It was probably my Uranus opposition. And one day I just had had enough and I packed a bag and I walked 8 miles. I don't know what I thought I was going to do because I had 4 kids. Eventually I come back, but it's funny, that emotional reaction might be worth diving into deeper, even for each of you. What kind of things seem to repeat emotionally through your life, because that might have arisen when you were from age 7 to 14. That's kind of funny. All right, so let's take a look at our Pleiadian-Earth energy for the day. We are in the beginning of a new week. Yesterday was the 13th, so we were in completion, right? We were looking back across the week, the 13 days, and we looked back to where it all began. It began at self-regulating, and how was that energy of self-regulating applied to each one of the days, and as we were evolving in our own personal world, in our own personal lives. So today is 1. It is an initiation. It is a new beginning. That's what the energy is today. Today is 1 devoting. So all 13 days, the energy of devotion, loyalty, trust, higher truth is going to be imbued into each one of the energies that come afterwards. So even though tomorrow is a different day, tomorrow is 2, oh goodness, I know I should know what comes next. After devoting is, can't see that, illuminating. So we go from devoting to illuminating, but there's still going to be some quality of devotion in that illumination. Just as when we get to choosing, there will be some element of devotion in choosing. So there's always the influence of the one day. What did we initiate? That is flavoring, if you will, all of the days that follow. And then we get to the 13 again, and we integrate all of that. Everything that began with 1 devotion or devoting, we are going to integrate as we move on. Now, devoting in the Mayan calendar was Ak, and it was a representation of the dog representing loyalty and trust and companionship. And then also in some cases it was represented by a foot, and the foot being that solid thing on the ground that gives you the ability to take the next step, right? So we have this new beginning energy, and this is energy, by the way, that we don't just like pick up off the street. I guess we could, but it's really streamed into us from the galactic center or from the cosmos. And we take in that energy, we take in that stream, and we can unite that with possibility, with intention, and we use that energy then for creative ideas, for opportunities, for thoughts. It is the point at which all things are possible as it relates to the intention of something new, but also toward that devoting energy. So it brings our attention from this vast field into this present moment, right now, right this beginning. And then devoting energy is about learning about loyalty. And what does that mean? And we see this in the United States. This is a huge thing going on in the president of the United States demanding loyalty from people where they're following him blindly. And then when they don't when they're not loyal to him, then they lose their jobs, right? Or they're somehow ostracized or made to pay for not being loyal. This is the absolute corruption of loyalty, right? This is the wrong use of loyalty energy. So we also, because that's in our outer world, we got to look at like, where's that happening for us as individuals, in our own communities, in our families, that kind of thing. Where are our loyalties being misplaced? Right? Where have we not really trusted the truth coming from our heart and instead relied on or trusted something in the outer world, a person in the outer world, to tell us what to be loyal to or what loyalty means, right? So this is a big, big thing with a lot of consequences as time goes on. And it's amazing to me how all of this keeps getting, everybody keeps getting away with all of this out there. And I just keep looking and shaking my head going, damn, we have got a lot of work to do within us for us to keep seeing this showing up. It showed up several times in that outer world, this idea of loyalty. So we have a new opportunity today to take loyalty and look at it in a new way. This is about consistency. This is about celebration, cooperation, and trust. And then trusting the truth that's coming from within you. Right? How many times have you known like warning bells going off? This isn't a trustworthy person, or this isn't a great thing. This isn't a great opportunity. And you ignore the warning bells. And then later you go, damn, I should have been listening, right? Because now I'm caught up in something and I can't get out of it. This is very community oriented energy too, by the way. So this is where we are grappling with inappropriate loyalty, and struggling to find, well, what is the proper use of loyalty? And if this is playing out in our communities and our families and that type of thing, which brings me to my dream last night. So this was so weird. It was this morning actually, because I woke up shaking my head going, oh my God. So, and this is not going to be a very distinct sharing of this dream because it was so filled with different symbols. First of all, there was the symbols of Aquarius. That was very powerful. And Aquarius is a sign that rules community, group mind, right? It's more devoted to the betterment of humanity, of the group, as opposed to the focus on the individual. Leo focuses on the individual. Its opposite, Aquarius, is more on the bigger picture, right? The more community energy, tribe energy. And in my dream, it was very clear to me that policing was not working. It works for the big things, right? When you have drug trafficking going on, or you have, rings of gangs and things like that going on. And these are big city things, not necessarily. Where I live, I never hear a siren. I never even see a policeman unless something weird's going on. But, in the bigger cities, there's crime and it's a huge problem. But who do we turn to when we have an issue with a neighbor? Or when we have an issue with something that's going on in our communities? Well, there isn't anything that is really established for that. So, for example, I'm going to give you a great example. A neighbor, who shall remain nameless, was having an issue with another neighbor who felt like they were misusing their land and doing things incorrectly according to the county. So they called the police and complained. That is not the proper use of that energy. So in my dream, we created community mediation groups where we as neighbors perhaps could take this problem to a body of people where it could be discussed and worked out and mediated to an end where we were able to all maintain a harmonious relationship. It was so weird because I've never thought of that ever. And it seemed to me to be a call for us to move into that more Aquarian energy. And that it made me think immediately of Saturn moving into Aquarius, where we are able to work out our issues within a group, and where everybody's at an even stature. One person's problem isn't greater than another person's problem, and the group who is mediating do not have any kind of hierarchical ability to solve your problem. They're just holding space for the parties to be able to work out their problem, much like mediation does with in divorce situations, when they're working out custody, or they're working out, who gets what. And that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more in our communities. Another example, here on the island, we had an issue. Some neighbors were really irked by the deer, and the deer were eating their plants and blah, blah, blah. And of course, their solution, some people's solution, was shoot them all, or, corral them and take them up somewhere else, get them out of our neighborhood. And of course, that just really rankled my sensibilities, because I value the fact that I live amongst nature. And if you have tender plants, then cover them up. But it would have been nice to have rather than these people with these, loud voices that were just disgusted, it would have been nice to be able to bring that into some kind of group or some kind of community where we could work out solutions, right? Where we could create win-win. That's really very Libran as well. Moon in Libra still, creating win-win. Right? How can we have both? How can we? And is it possible? Right? Is it possible that we can do that as human beings? Yes. Right? Our more matriarchal societies in the past did just that. Right? They worked out their issues within the tribe or within their communities. So we can do this too. Right? The patriarchal energy, as it took over on the planet, for one thing, it totally overlaid, that's the word I guess I'm looking for, the more feminine energy, the more matriarchal energy, in favor of patriarchy, which is always more hierarchical. Right? There's the God, there's the, the leader, there's the president, there's the whatever dictator or authority, and then underneath that are the minions. And so we have to be able to move out of that in order to move more fully into what community means, right? And to be able to do that, we have to make that change from within. So I thought that was an interesting energy to pop up today on a day where it is about where are our loyalties and what do we want to celebrate together, and what do we want to create as a community or as a tribe. And all of that is up in our faces and will be. There's that overlying energy then that is going to kind of be seeping in through the next 12 days as we move through the evolution of this particular coming week. So look out for that in your own life. See, where is that playing out? Where do you see it showing up? And then what is the role that you're playing in that? Right? Is it something positive? Is it a possibility that, yeah, you're not doing so well there, and that you can, improve that area? You can make a new beginning in that area. It's fascinating, just a fascinating possibility. Okay, everybody, let's take a look at final comments. Vicky, good morning. She says, my Saturn return is in Aries in the 10th. I have about 3.5 years. Saturn won't be in Aries for a while, right? Saturn stays between 2.5 and 3 years in each sign. So he's just moving into Aquarius, and after Aquarius, he'll have to move into Pisces. And after Pisces, then it will come Aries. So you have about 6 years maybe that you can contemplate where you are in your cycle. Asa, good morning. My second Saturn return is in Aquarius, getting prepared. Exactly that. Exactly that. You were the one I was thinking about, Asa, that the conversation we had where we realized how some people in their Saturn return get hit because Saturn moves across the point it was when they were born, and then it retrogrades and moves back over that same point. And then it goes direct and goes back over that same point. So people like me, people like you, Asa, we're going to get hit 3 times with this particular Saturn return, just by virtue of the degree that it's at in our own charts, and the retrograde cycle and where it sits with that. So yay for us, right? 3 times we get to be in this energy. I don't remember being like that when I had my first one, but of course I wasn't really an astrologer then either. and I wasn't paying attention for that. I wasn't looking out for that. All right, questions before I go today. Anybody? Jacqueline says, woohoo, mine is in Cancer. You're a ways away from it there, friend. So this is good. All right, I don't see new questions popping up here. And if you had a question, and I'm not seeing it because remember, I'm just seeing the top 4 comments, you might want to write it in there again so that I can see it. Don't forget, tomorrow is our first Gene Keys study group. And I know that some of you might not be able to break away from your day to join us live at 12 noon on the West Coast, 3 p.m. on the East Coast, 8 p.m. in the UTC time zone. But I will be recording that, and somewhat maybe an hour or so afterwards, it should be available here or on the Gene Keys website, Gene Keys study group Facebook page for you to be able to listen to. All right, no other questions. Okay, I guess that I am done for the day. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow. Unbelievably, tomorrow is Friday, Valentine's Day. I think tomorrow we'll take a look at the energy of love in your human design. That'll be fun to look at. And the moon, of course, will be in Scorpio, perfect for passion and intensity and sex for Valentine's Day. I wonder how many babies are born 9 months after Valentine's Day. That's funny because that would make them Scorpio babies. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me this morning. I will see you all tomorrow. Take care.